welcome everyone to this very special presentation. I'm super excited to be here this evening to talk about without any question, hands down, the number one topic that I know I hear the most about at Engaged Marriage, and I'm sure our guest, Dr. Corey Allen, hears as well, and that is communication. My name is Dustin Reekman. We're going to go through a more formal introduction here in just a second. But tonight's topic, again, is how to communicate your way to a better marriage, talking optional. So a really quick agenda here. It's a pretty simple workshop, but I think you'll find it to be very powerful. And really what we're focused on here are some really practical tips, some things that you can actually walk away with either while you're doing this or immediately after this presentation and make a difference in your marriage. That's really what this is all about. So we're going to do a quick introduction. Then we're going to go through 5 kind of key action areas that you can take action and improve the communication in your marriage. We'll have some homework, some fun, healthy homework for you. And then, of course, at the end, we're going to leave as much time as possible for questions and answers. We've already got a lot of questions. And if you have some more while you listen, that's great. And we'll have an opportunity to ask those at the end of the presentation. So again, my name's Dustin Reekman. I run a marriage site called Engaged Marriage. I've been doing that for about 4 years. On the personal side, I've been married for over 12 years, have 3 small children, and live kind of near St. Louis, Missouri. My guest tonight is Dr. Corey Allen. I've known Corey for quite a long time online here, and again, just extremely excited that he's joined us tonight. Corey's also a husband of more than 20 years. He's a dad, he's an author, a speaker, and he is a marriage and family therapist with a PhD in that field. So Corey certainly knows this stuff, both from a practical standpoint, and he's got the education and the credentials to back it up. So Corey, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
Well, good. You sound good, and I'm excited to get started. So if you're ready, I think we'll jump into the first topic here and kind of make no haste. All right. So our first topic, and what I'll do here is kind of introduce the big picture and then turn it over to Corey for kind of the meat of each of these points. And so the first one here is kind of the foundation. I view this as sort of the meat behind why the other 4 points are going to kind of make sense for you. So the topic here is to hear what your spouse is saying without overreacting or jumping to conclusions, and kind of the vice versa is to make sure that you're heard by them as well. So Corey, why don't you take it away and dive in on this one?
Well, I think that the fundamental thing to get across as we start tonight is the idea that when couples come into me and say, hey, we have trouble communicating. We just we have constant misunderstandings, miscommunications, et cetera, I try to flip that on its head and present the idea that you cannot not communicate. That in every single committed relationship, in every single important relationship, everything we do and don't do communicates. So it really comes down to how do you handle what somebody is saying or not saying. And the best example I can think of, Dustin, is let's say you've been home all day and your wife comes home and you and the kids have been, had a good day, and your wife comes home and she slams the door and throws her keys on the counter and storms to the back of the house.
That never happens.
Yeah, it never happens in my house either. I mean, my wife just comes home and throws herself into my arms.
Right.
And has been longing. No, but all of that communicates very clearly, doesn't it? I mean, no words have been spoken, but it's very, very clear what's being communicated. And
no, absolutely. And sometimes even, in that case, it was a pretty dramatic case. But I mean, I hear from a lot of couples, and I've experienced in both ways in my own marriage. I mean, you can walk in the door and just feel the mood change. And so it can really almost be just being present near each other. You don't even have to say, you don't have to give a dirty look. You can just tell if someone's having a bad day, and it can really set the mood and set the tone for the whole family.
Right.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I want to try to get clear with people is that everything we do communicates, and everything we interpret communicates from other people. So being able to handle a message that I don't like, or I don't accept, or I don't understand clearly is vital to really being able to connect deeper in a marriage. So it comes down to understanding the differences between men and women, And I hate to do this, but we have to speak a little stereotypically, and I realize there are exceptions with every single one of these examples that we give. But there's the differences between rational logic and emotional logic, and typically a person is going to be more one than the other. I would say stereotypically, men are going to be more rational logic, women are going to be more emotional logic, but that is not at all the case all the time. So understanding those differences in the way we interpret things, the way we address things, the way we talk about things, that's where we get so much stuff that trips us up, because my wife is explaining something to me and she's using a lot of feeling words, and I don't hear those the same as I would thinking words, let's say. So sometimes I need to slow down and ask clearly, okay, are you saying X, or are you saying this? And be sure I understand what she's saying, because I could misinterpret it, and then I react to it and I respond. And typically anytime we get defensive or reactive, it doesn't go well.
Yeah,
So,
no, and I think to your point that this is, it's kind of got a masculine or feminine trait associated with it, but it can certainly be interchangeable. It could be that the woman is more of that logical,
absolutely,
that logical approach. Most cases, though, and I don't know if it's just the way we attract each other, maybe but it seems like there's always one and the other in a relationship. And in our relationship, it is more the stereotypical thing where I'm more of that thinking brain, and even to the point where my education and background is in engineering. So I'm always trying to be logical. I'm trying to break down problems and solve them. And so,
right.
like in our case, my wife Bethany, may just be trying to express an emotion and just tell me how she's feeling, and I'm immediately trying to process that and give her solutions. And sometimes that's
Right.
the most aggravating conversations that we have, because she doesn't want solutions. She just wants to be heard. And
Right.
that's a really common thing I hear. I'm sure you hear between men and women.
Yeah, and so it's understanding really what is expected in each situation. So it's and this is where we're going to be heading, I know, as we continue down this call. But it's understanding that how can I be more in the moment and be clear about what I'm saying and also what I'm hearing. Because my wife, if she comes home and storms in the house, like the example we gave earlier, then sometimes I might just need to give her some space, because I know her. I've been with her for over 20 years. So, or it could be I need to get in there and see what's going on. And so it's just the willingness to recognize situations as they unfold and not react to them is huge in changing this whole dynamic of how we communicate with one another.
Yeah.
Because then we get into this lizard brain component, which that's where we get into this idea of it's just guttural reactions to things. That's the fight or flight or freeze response. That's the innermost part of our brain that was the first thing to develop, that all creatures have, and it's all for survival. But as humans, we've evolved with the prefrontal cortex and the other parts of our brain that allow us to do higher order processing of things. So we have gut reactions to things, and oftentimes that's what will rule things that we don't agree with, or that we feel we're being attacked, or is getting too close for comfort. And so we just turn our lizard brain over and just react and respond, or become defensive, or stonewall, or all the other things that can cause trouble. And so just recognizing these are the things that we do. And then as we continue down this course together tonight, we can talk about, all right, here's how you can counterbalance that some. It's not that you can ever shut the lizard brain off. It serves a definite purpose for our life. But it's recognizing that, okay, here's a great example to just wrap this slide up, I think. That if you talk about the differences between men and women, one of the best things I can think of is when we come to this whole idea of, let's say, Dustin, that you and your wife both are working, let's say, and you have a weekend and it's a really good one together. The kids were gone for part of it, so you had just a good couple night as part of it. And so you go to work Monday morning, and she's talking to her coworkers, which are also female, and they're like, hey, I know you had a date night and a weekend. How did it go? And she's like, oh, man, it was great. We were intimate for 3 hours last night. We had a great dinner. We had a walk in the park. Sex may or may not have even happened, but it was just a good, intimate time together. and they're all just eating that up. They're all just loving that because that's just kind of right in their wheelhouse. Well, same thing. You show up to work that next day, and you're with a bunch of your male coworkers, and they, hey man, I heard you guys had a weekend together. How did it go? I said, oh man, it was great. We were intimate for 3 hours last night. Guys' reaction to that's going to be, liar.
Right.
Because we just interpret things different. Because to us, intimacy is sex, and it's much more than that. But that's kind of the way men are wired, and women are wired different. And those are things that trip us up, because when we try to communicate something, and we're doing it to somebody of the opposite sex, oftentimes they hear it differently. They interpret it differently, and so we have to give them room to react, to respond, to ask questions. And then we have to be sure enough of ourselves to stick with what we're saying, maybe try to clarify, and then we just keep going.
Yeah, great. No, I think that was a great wrap up for this slide. And like I said, I feel like a lot of this is probably things that the listeners know, but a lot of times we kind of lose the consciousness of it. We're not conscious of our differences with our spouse that we've maybe been with for 5 or 15 years. Sometimes we feel like we can just not communicate, but regardless of not using words, that's not happening. So we have to try to be conscious about it and kind of overrule that lizard brain that sometimes we just want to be, in the moment and reactive to things, and that we have to take advantage of our free will and our higher reasoning and be a better spouse.
Well, and that's where we can have there's physiological responses that come along associated with the lizard brain. Whenever you get into this defensive mode, you can feel that in your body typically.
Yeah.
I feel that in my chest and my gut. That it's just, I get this tightness of like, whoa, I'm being attacked here. And so I have to then slow that down and say, okay, am I really being attacked, or am I in the wrong? Maybe I'm justifiably being attacked for something because I've done something that was offensive or inappropriate or wasn't in line with what whoever I'm in the conversation with was wanting. So it's recognizing that. And so I guess the key, I would say this, if anybody's taking notes tonight or listening to this at a later time, it's learning how to react less so I can respond better.
Perfect. All right, well, let's move on to the next point here. And this is really about clarity. So how to be crystal clear in the messages that you send. And again, this is both if you're talking or in nonverbal communication.
Right. Yeah, and that's the idea of clear requests. Because if you think about it, how often do we go through our life and we go through the times that we're seeking something where it seems like we're trying to get it without having to ask for it? And especially when it involves somebody else. We're not talking about just I'm really interested in a bowl of ice cream. So, that's kind of simple. I just go to the freezer and get a bowl of ice cream, assuming it's in the freezer. But if I'm wanting a deeper connection with my wife, I have to go after that. I can't just try to maneuver myself on the outside chance that she's going to be in the same realm of interest that I am. That's just kind of waiting for the stars to align.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to be in the right position, and all the while I'm upset because she's not meeting my need or recognizing what I'm wanting. And so, and the flip side of that is true too. And this is something I have been guilty of, and I don't know if you have, Dustin, but I'm assuming other people on our call have been guilty of. If I've had a bad day, I'll come home and grump around the house because of what I'm wanting is for my wife to ask, "Hey, are you okay?"
Yep.
Because then that's saying she cares about me. And so I try to get that by just flat out manipulating her, by letting my grumpiness be known without just coming in and saying, "Man, my day was terrible." Typically I do that. She's gonna, "Man, what happened?" So it's so funny how we go about trying to do these things to avoid the risk of rejection, when instead we need to be more clear about what we're wanting and making requests and just asking. And if you tie that with the idea of you're not always going to get what you want, but if you're clear about it, at least you've earned some of your own self-respect. Because it hasn't been a manipulation.
Yeah, and I think some of this goes back to kind of that proverbial situation of, well, how am I supposed to know that's what you wanted? Well, you should just know. Or if I have to ask, then it doesn't count. And I can see that. We all would love the spontaneous romantic fairy tale, but the reality is, For the
That's
most part,
very
you have
good.
to send clear requests. You have to be proactive. You're in a mature relationship. You've been married, here for a while, and there's room for a little of that, for
Right.
surprises and things like that. But from day-to-day communication standpoint, I mean, that's one of the big lessons I've had to learn in our relationship. We've been together since high school, and so we kind of had that history of that high school maturity of a relationship where that was, yeah, well, you should just know. And she might stomp her foot and run off, or vice versa.
Right.
I might huff and puff because she's not feeling me. And that's one thing that I can say that we have learned over the years is we've both studied marriage, helped other couples, and lived life together here for 12 years married. That you just have to ask. You just have to be clear in what you want.
Right. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to ask. I mean, it also just means you go for what you want.
There you go. Yeah.
I want a hug from my wife, so I'm going to walk over and give her a hug.
There you go. Yeah.
Rather than I'm going to stand there hoping she comes around and gives me a hug because I'm sending all those subtle signals that I really want a hug from her. You know, those are just the games that happen in marriage. And what's so funny is if you couple this idea with the idea we just talked about of how you cannot not communicate, you're grumping around or all that kind of stuff is really communicating. And so oftentimes, my wife would be like, I'm not interested in that, so I'm not going to cater to that at all because I don't want to enforce that behavior. So
Yeah.
why would I respond well to that? And so it's just the idea of being clear about what you want, having a direction in your life, then using the positive action language. This is really a more of a component with parenting ideas, but it also fits real well with marriage where I think of the best example is with parenting. Hey, don't run. You're telling somebody what you don't want them to do,
Yeah.
that's good, but oftentimes it's kind of unclear. What are you really requesting? Rather than saying, "I need you to walk, please." That's a different. I'm being very specific and clear about what I want.
And I need you to
Or,
walk, please, because I don't want you to get ran over.
right,
Yeah. Yeah.
right. Or it's the idea of like with a spouse that we can also get real vague with, "I want you to understand me." Well, okay, I've been with you for 20 years. I think I do understand you. No, 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 no. I don't, and that just takes you down this whole other rabbit trail as opposed to, "I want you to tell me what you heard me just say."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's very clear and it's straightforward. Or, so it's this ideas of just, we can be vague and we can be negative, but if we can switch that and be specific and positive, we increase the likelihood of really getting what we want or having clear feedback on why we're not going to get what we want, and then we can alter and adjust as we need.
Oh yeah. I like that a lot. And I guess if I was taking a piece of practical advice away from this, I think the point that you made of asking your spouse, whether it's a heated argument or you just feel like you're not getting it, please tell me what you think I'm asking for. Please tell me where you think I'm coming from to make sure we're on the same page here. I
Yeah,
think that could go a long way.
and that's the same example you used earlier of your wife sometimes comes to you with just kind of sharing what's been going on, and you turn into, "I want to fix this for you." And I have that with my wife all the time. And so one of the things we've found is we get to where we'll interrupt things at the very beginning. If you can kind of sense, if you're with somebody long enough, you get a sense of where they're going.
Yep.
If like they just want to vent, because my wife processes work and her day out loud a lot of times. So she comes home and just wants to talk about her day. And I'm fine with that. But if I get the sense of it's getting into problem solving world, I'll ask straight out, "What do you want from me here? Are you wanting me just to hear you, or are you wanting my suggestions?"
Love
And
it. Yeah.
then she can answer that. "I just want you to hear me." And we've had times where it starts with that, and then as it unfolds, it gets to, "Okay, now I want to know what you think." Okay, well, here you go. And here's and then I can respond. So it's just, if you're with somebody enough, you know them well enough, you're a student of them well enough. So it's kind of be a little more elementary at times of, what exactly are you asking for here? Or what exactly do you need from me here? And that can diffuse so much of what the tension that could be rising between you.
Good deal. Okay, so this next point And everything we've talked about here, obviously the focus here, the folks listening are almost entirely married couples, and so that's really our focus is making your marriage better through better communication. But really, all of these things work with your children and the workplace, throughout your life, because communication's happening in all those places. And this slide in particular, it's speak more from the best in you, and I think best is the key word here,
Yep.
both to your spouse and children. So if anyone listening with children, or if you plan to have children in the future, really tune in, because I can tell you that the things Corey is going to cover here are vitally important from a parenting standpoint.
Yeah, and this all fits into the idea that I believe with Simple Marriage and in the work that I do, is that marriage at its core is designed to just help us grow up and be better people. That's the role of my spouse. She is not there to provide happiness for me. She's there to help me be a better person. And the way she does it is by, in essence, demanding the best from me, and I am doing the same from her. So a spouse in their role in your life will just kind of push buttons, irk you, get under your skin, but also encourage you, challenge you, praise you, all the different support you, all the different things that a spouse does. But the purpose of that is to help us grow up and help us just to be better people. And so I think that whenever a spouse is done or takes a break from helping you grow up, your kids then slide in and help finish the job. and that's where, my kids will use the exact same terminology and tonality with me that I do with them. Yep. And that's just because they just model it. They're sponges, they just pick it up. So when you recognize the tensions and the things that just spike between you, learning how to self-soothe is the best path forward that I know. And the idea of self-soothing is just learning how to calm your own anxieties. Let's go back to the example you gave earlier, Dustin, of, someone comes into the house and they're in a bad mood, and they can just dramatically alter the whole feeling of the entire house, because anxiety is one of the most contagious things there is. So learning that, okay, wait, I'm kind of feeling stressed out because you're stressed out and I don't want to be. So what do you need to do to calm yourself down? What do you need to do to get out of a flooded state? And sometimes just acknowledging it out loud is a great step forward. It's just, man, I'm feeling tense about this and I don't even know why. Or, the way you just responded to me there, I'm really kind of tensed up. I need a moment to just take a few deep breaths. And then that's the next step of self-soothing, is breathing. Is 3 really good deep breaths work wonders for our stress levels. So it's just learning how to calm yourself down. So stop, state your condition, and then take responsibility for yourself. This is something that works really well with kids, but it also works with a spouse. Is if you're in an argument, quote unquote, or a discussion with somebody you really care about,
mm-hmm.
and they're hooking you in. They know the buttons. Let's say it's with the teenager, because they're one of the best lawyers money can buy.
I haven't got there yet, but
I haven't either.
I'm listening. Okay.
Yeah, but I worked with them for years before I got into the counseling world. But it's one of those that when you can realize you are starting to lose your cool, that you just can stop it and say, hey, wait, I'm starting to get a little upset, or I'm starting to lose my cool here. I'm going to take a break, and I'll be back in 5 minutes, and we'll talk more. And that works well with a spouse, especially if you give them here's when we're going to pick this back up. Because I know as men, we can fall victim to this just isn't a good time to talk right now, and never is a good time to talk about that. And so it's stonewalling, and she is going through the roof because you're not addressing her concerns. But if you say, hey, let me go outside, take a breath, and in 10 minutes, come out and join me, or I'll come back in, let's talk some more. And it could be you just take breaks all the time. So, but if you're moving the conversation down the road, who cares about the process, as long as it's working? And then you move into the idea of being honest 100% of the time. That a lot of what trips us up when we're talking about not speaking from the best in us is when we're not honest, when we don't say what we think. Because what happens is, if I'm asked a direct question, my wife can read me better than any poker player, because we've had so much life together. So if I'm not honest and I'm shading something or omitting something, she picks up on that usually. And so it's the idea of be true to yourself, let the best in you, because honesty truly is the best policy in every situation that I can think of. So be honest. And this doesn't mean, I don't think this necessarily means you remove filter from brain to mouth and you let every single thought come out. That's typically not as beneficial,
Yeah.
but there is merit to it because it will start to alter your thoughts. Because if you know you're going to put it all out there, wow.
Yeah, you
I
can
need to
be careful in
yeah,
how you say it, but the substance of what you say, is still honest.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's, yeah, because honesty, there's tact involved, there's humility involved, there's grace involved. So it's not, I'm going to be honest and I'm just going to attack because, Corey said, be honest. So here you go. But it's learning how to just be true to yourself, because when you are, life has a whole nother synergy to it, doesn't it? That it's just things are better rather than
Absolutely.
when you're kind of being shady or magician like
Yeah.
or something. Well, that just doesn't go well.
Yeah, I think the true dishonesty here is one issue, and I think the other side of this is just maybe it's not this being honest 100% of the time, but I do see it this way. The situation of just not wanting to talk about it or not wanting to open up, and I can point to our marriage, and this again works both ways. Probably the most frequent source of tension in our marriage is when something's bothering one of us and we aren't just honest about what it is. So,
Yeah.
if Bethany's kind of, like you said, I can sense something's not right.
Well,
I
yeah,
don't,
she's
is it
communicating.
is it the
Yeah, she's
kids?
communicating.
Yeah,
Something's
she's
going on.
communicating, exactly. So is it the kids? Is it me? Is it something with her friends? And she just doesn't want to talk. And I'm like, what's wrong? Nothing.
Right.
What's wrong? Nothing. And that's when I start getting hot. It's like, will you
Right.
just talk to me? I want to, because again, I want to fix it. And
Right.
and if she's
Well, and
just honest, and then
also, Dustin, I'm going to interrupt you though,
yeah, go
because
ahead.
this is one thing that I think is important is whenever we have that kind of a sense from a spouse and they won't fill in the blank with us, we usually think it's us, don't
Yeah.
we? Because we think we are the center of our spouse's universe. So if my wife is upset, it's obviously my fault. Well, no, reality is I'm not the center of her universe. I'm a part of it,
Yeah.
but most of the stuff that goes on doesn't really matter to me. I'm not in the scheme of things. So it's kind of that lack of information. Our brains will go, the uninvolved spouse will go all links to, wow, is it me? What did I, and that's where you then start, come on, tell me what's up.
Right, and if you get too pestering, then they might just make something up. Like, yeah, that was it. And you never get to the core of the problem because you can
Right.
take it too far. But I think, yeah, I really liked what you said there. That was a good distinction.
Right. Because it's also the idea of, there's something bothering me. And well, what is it? And it could truly be, I don't know.
Yeah,
But I'm seeking to figure out what it is. And when I need your or want your assistance from it, I will have the respect to come and ask for you. That it's just so funny how we will just take for granted the people we live with, but be so respectful to everybody else outside the house. And if we would switch that some and bring that more inside of be honest. Hey, I'm gonna say what I need. I'm gonna ask. I'm gonna tell you what's going on. Some of it's not fun, but life isn't fun sometimes.
Yeah.
So there is pain involved, but me skirting it only furthers the pain. So sometimes I need to just be clear about, I was really upset because of this, because you said this or this happened or something, and maybe amends need to be made, or maybe it's just something I need to work through and grow through on my own, and it's just where I am right now. And so if you add to it this last component we got on this slide of letting go of attachments to outcome, this is such a huge one on the idea of being honest, because I think most of the time as humans, we have such attachment to a desired or an expected outcome to things that, I plan this date with my wife and I have all these expectations, and typically it's leading up to sex. That's kind of where I'm wanting the whole thing to end. But if I am so attached to that outcome, it's very likely I'm not going to enjoy the whole journey to get to it, because I'm always so tentative on, oh, is she not like, oh, what, oh, wait, that didn't go well. That movie, she didn't like that movie, so now she's probably mad, or and you're just reading all of these things, and it's so exhausting. So if it's the best in us, and we can learn how to let go of an attachment to outcome, we can be honest, and we can put out there what I want. Hey, I want to spend a great evening with you. I have some plans, but man, they can be altered. And then you just kind of go through it, and you see it, and you allow for spontaneity, and you allow for pushback, and you allow for altering of things. And if you look at the idea of attachment to outcome as an expectation, to me, the idea of an expectation, the way I define it, is it's just a planned disappointment. So the more I can be in the moment, and the more I can let what I want and desire drive the moment, the more likely I'm going to end up getting what I'm really wanting, but I don't know how I'm going to get there. And that's part of the fun.
Yeah. So it's kind of living in the present and kind of being there instead of only being focused on some outcome.
Well, think about how much time we spend thinking about either past or present. I mean, past or future.
Yeah.
We spend all this time, well, when we did this last time, it was a disaster. And so you're always just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Or you're just so waiting for the next thing. I mean, I used to have this problem when I was in my early 20s, that I was so caught up in what was to come that I missed so much of what was going on. So, I mean, one of the things I did, and this changed now because this was before the world of everybody having a smartphone. But I took my watch off, because I would find myself all the time looking at my watch, waiting for the next thing. That I'm like, wait, I'm so caught up in what's to come that I'm missing what's going on. So I figure I don't need to know time. If I do, I got a phone, or there's clocks everywhere around me, so I won't be late to things. But I just took out that distraction and tried to learn, how can I be more in the present, and that's more the best in me.
Yeah, that's good. I like that linkage there, and I know that this is probably one of my bigger struggles as well. Being kind of an impatient person, very goal and achievement oriented, and I hadn't really made this connection until you were talking there. That we kind of joke that we were married for over 5 years before we had our first child, and we remember nothing about that time. I mean, it's like
yeah.
Now what would I give for one night of a date night? And look, we had 5 years together. And what did we do? Like, we didn't do anything. We don't have any like big memories of that. And it goes back to what you're saying. We were, I think, at that time living for the future, thinking about when we did have kids, when we get our first house, when we get our jobs, and we were so forward thinking that we didn't realize what was right in front of us and enjoy that time together.
And that same thing applies to children. You get a chance to play on the floor with your kids for 5 minutes. Well, enjoy and be present that entire 5 minutes. Don't be constantly, oh, I got to go to the next thing. Oh, enjoy it. And then when you need to disengage and move to the next thing. Yeah,
and being present that can be a whole nother presentation, especially in the society that we live in now. But it definitely ties into communication.
Because your presence, if you can be 100% present with your spouse, that communicates a ton.
Yeah.
As opposed to, hey, we spent a whole evening together. Yeah, but you were watching football, and
or you're on your
phone
on
Facebook, and then you switched that, and you were on Twitter and working on a blog, and she's watching a movie, and and it's just like, you were together, but you were miles apart. So learning to just be present in the moment within your own body and being soothed throughout all of that is a tremendously great way to go through married life.
Very good. So we'll get to our next point here, which all these kind of build on each other, I feel like. And in this one, we're talking about living more authentically and being better connected with others. So, the slide the image I chose for this actually ties really well back into that being present. Everywhere you go, there you are. And that, again, this is a struggle that I have, and I think I could say Bethany has too, both for each other, with our kids. And those times, though, that we become conscious of it, really do focus on being present, really can be pretty magical, even if they're very simple. So I'll let you take it from here, because I'm sure you have a lot to share on this.
Yeah, I mean, this ties into what we've been talking about with the idea of self-soothing and being honest. And it's just being consistent. I mean, I think of this is a struggle I've had in my life is some self-discipline kind of things. It's just the whole, I would say I'm going to be home in an hour, and an hour and a half is when I get home.
Yeah.
Or, I would say I would stop and pick up milk at the store, and I wouldn't. And, I forgot, and it's all of that stuff just speaks volumes that we don't even realize. And so the more I can be consistent, and the more I can be me, and the more I can be a man of my word, that sure, things come up when you say, hey, I should be able to leave here by 5, so I'll be home, 5:30 tonight. And maybe a meeting goes long, or a client goes long, or there's bad traffic. Well, we have a phone. You could call, say, hey, I got caught up. I'm a little late. I'll be there. But it's just learning how to be who you are and be consistently who you are goes a long way to ever having the possibility of a deeper connection. Because if it's not, it's a pseudo you that you're trying to connect with somebody else. And that never can go deep because there's no depth to a pseudo you. That's the constant game of, or the marketing department of you. That's the what you think your spouse wants you to be, or what you perceive that their perception is of you. And I mean, it gets real convoluted here, but it's the idea of just the more I can be me, and I can put it out there and say, hey, this is me. I'm not proud of all of it, but this is me. And the more I have the possibility of experiencing love, and the more I have a possibility of experiencing depth of connection.
So that's what you mean by living more authentically is, and I guess being more consistent also, is this idea of kind of applying yourself, and not even applying yourself, but I guess letting, can you rephrase that for me in kind of more practical terms? I think you gave a good example there, but kind of what do you mean by be consistent so that you can live more authentically?
Well, it's just, I guess it boils down to that whenever somebody acts inconsistently, there's the people around them know and realize they're not paying attention. You're not engaged. You're not involved in this. You're not that. But if you can be consistent, and you can be, I make a point. Here's a practical example, because I have 2 kids at my house that are 8 and 6 years old, and then my wife. And one of the things I try to do is eliminate multitasking, because it's a misnomer. We can't multitask.
Absolutely.
We just do everything poorly, or not as well, if you want to flip that. But so I try to, if I get a chance to be with my wife, like when we're walking in the hall and we pass each other and we get just a couple seconds or a minute or two just to talk, I stop and try to just be completely there and be consistent with her. And I do the same thing with my kids. And that's teaching, I'm there, I'm here, I'm engaged, I'm involved. Because at the same thing, you could be spending time with them, but you're never there. You're on the phone all the time. You're constantly checking social media stuff, or on the phone with somebody else, or watching TV, but you're there, and that's teaching them poorly on who you are in their world, who you are in their life. And so I believe as a spouse, the more I can be consistent, the more I'll be authentic, the more it'll be me, and the more the real me comes through.
Okay. No, that definitely helps. And I think to kind of relate that back to our world, I'm certainly not perfect, so these things aren't cardinal rules that always get followed. But
right,
I think
we make mistakes.
I think a way for one, I guess, and a good example in our house, 2 examples of a way that we can be consistent with each other, and that we've done a much better job of that, is one, when I get home, my phone goes on the kitchen counter, and it stays there until the kids are in bed. And then, because otherwise, I know what's going to happen. It's going to sit on the chair next to me, and whenever my kids are trying to tell me something about school, or they want to play, I'm going to be like, okay, and I'm going to glance at my phone to see if I got a new email or whatever.
Right.
And and I've had my kids take mock, old phones that are theirs, and they'll totally demonstrate the same thing back to me, and that really drove home to me that wow, what am I teaching my kids here? So that's one thing, and I think the other thing for us in our house to be consistent, again, we don't get it every day, but I can tell you it makes a huge difference in our communication when we do, is, I'm kind of known for this 15-minute idea, in that, if you just have 15 minutes to be present with one another, and it can be as simple as just sitting on a couch chatting. It could be going for a walk. And in our case, sometimes, we'll have the TV on or something, if it's a mutual interest show, so we're not zoning each other out. But we have 15 minutes there after the kids go to bed that we call it our couple time. And it's just time for us to be present with one another, hopefully be really authentic. That's usually the spark of a lot of good conversations. Mm-hmm. And then, if I've got work to do, or she's wanting to go to her friend's house or whatever, it happens after that 15 minutes. So it's a small commitment, but it can make a huge difference. So at least in the chaos of a given day, we've got that little small window to be authentic and to be consistent with each other. So I think that ties in well.
It does. And here, let's wrap this point up with this idea that you teach people how to treat you. And so the more I can be consistent, the better I teach what I want, or who I am.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
And then we move into this idea of leading with love. And that's just the idea that if you think about a marriage, one way to view a marriage, especially when it comes to communication, is it's a dance. That we're dancing through life together. And typically there has to be a lead. That doesn't mean it's the man all the time. That doesn't mean it's the woman all the time. But there typically is, if you look at the strengths of a relationship, there's somebody that's leading with whatever topic or role or concept you're talking about. So what I think about when it comes to learning how to connect better with others is I need to lead my life with love. And that's the idea of I need to set the tone for my life to be about what I want it to be about. That my spouse is not the end-all, be-all of my story. No spouse wants that. Nobody wants to be smothered and to be the object of everything of another person. It sounds good, but in time, no. I could think of, okay, for a weekend, I'd take it maybe. But I probably would only survive about a day.
Yeah, in those early days of kind of that infatuation stage, when you mostly when you're dating, but that certainly wears off.
That's a chemically induced high.
Exactly.
That's going on in your brain. That's phenylethylamine flooding your brain, and that's a true euphoric feeling that we have when we fall in love. But that wears off anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, and then you wake up one morning and go, who are you? Who is this person in my bed? So then it comes down to my own shoulders. It rests on my own shoulders and how I live my own life, how I lead my own life. And so if I can lead with love, and I can lead my family with love, I'm very much more than likely going to have a great connection with people, because they know I'll have their best interest at heart. I'll have my best interest. It's a mixture of things. So it's just learning how to just truly lead my own life and set the tone for my life, because I want to teach people better how to treat me. And so as I do that more and more, I increase the likelihood of a greater depth of a connection with people. And then we just get into the real simple one of just let your yes be yes and your no be no. That how many times do we go through life, Dustin, where we think we have to justify decisions and rationalize things, when a lot of times no is no, or yes is yes, that I don't necessarily have to have a rationale for things. If it's a major big decision, sure. But if it's just, hey, do you want Chinese food for the 15th time tonight? No. Why? I don't want it. No. So it's just being clear and concise, I guess, is a great way to phrase that too. I'm going to seek what I want. I'm going to answer questions. I'm going to be engaged, and I'm going to be as clear and concise as I can be. Because anytime you go beyond the 2-sentence rule, you typically start adding doubt to things. If you talk too much for a simple question, what are you hiding? What are you changing? What are you skirting? What are you altering?
Yep. And that ties right back to the main point here, which is to live authentically. And I think a good practical way to live authentically is to try not to be short with your spouse, but like you said, when it comes to simple things, it shouldn't require a big explanation if you're being honest and you're being loving about it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, this is not at all about the deep conversations that we have with our spouse. The 2-sentence rule, no. I did not say just have 2 sentences with a deep, intimate conversation. This is when you're having exchanges about, the pushbacks back and forth of things. Sometimes you don't have to justify things, but you also don't have to be stonewalling on what you believe. If you hold on to it with a death grip and cannot be altered, well, that's kind of means you're living your life a little closed off, doesn't it? So be open to influence, take it in, adjust, see what happens, because things don't have to be solved in the moment all the time. We're talking about life.
Yeah.
And it's usually not, it's not a 30-minute sitcom.
Yeah, for sure. And something I maybe should have mentioned at the top of the workshop here, it just kind of occurred to me, because what I find as we're going through here, we've probably already hit on 10 to 15 points that our communication is very complex, and it is unlike something like money, which can be very pointed, like do X, Y, Z and you'll be successful. Communication is so personalized, it's so interpersonal and dynamic. What I think most people are going to find as we're going through this, and we still have certainly more to cover, is some of these things really resonate either for them or they think of their spouse when they hear these points. Some of them they're like, I can take it or leave it. So really focus in. Hopefully at the end of this you'll have a good 5 points that you've jotted down, and you can go back and listen and really be conscious about these things and take some of those practical steps that Corey and to a lesser extent myself have shared, and focus on those.
Great points, dude.
Yeah. Oh, well, thanks. I appreciate that. But yeah, I don't want people to feel overwhelmed because there's a lot here, but it's a complex topic, and we're hitting all those real key points that you hear from couples in counseling and coaching, and I hear on a coaching side, and on the communication front. And
right.
Don't be overwhelmed by this. We want to keep it as simple as possible, but we want it to be practical for you.
Yeah, and keep in mind though too that this slide you just brought up is a little more how-to kind of stuff. But what we've talked about so far, I think, is more just the dynamics of communication. This is what's going on in every communicating situation.
And for some people, it may be, oh, really? This is not just our marriage. This is how everyone's. This is how this is how Corey's marriage is too. So that probably is helpful.
This is just the way. This is a lens to view what's going on between you. So it's not necessarily a how-to, because it does have to be personalized and adapted to each specific situation. But those dynamics, when you're talking about a committed relationship in the container of marriage, that's one of the main pressure cookers of our growth, is how we communicate with each other. How do we ask for what we want? How do we seek what we want? How do we lick our wounds when we don't get it, or when we get pushback, or our spouse wants to do something that I'm flat out adamant you're not going to do? And
right.
Well, those are just life, and you have to feel your way through those. Trust your gut, be present, lead with authenticity, and see what happens. I mean, there's not a 30-minute sitcom, that a lot of what happens in communication, and here's a great stat to add to this conversation, Dustin, that John Gottman's research, and he is a great researcher when it comes to what happens in marriage and the predicting of divorce.
Yeah.
He's come up with the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and he's come up with his Love Lab up in Seattle, where he can watch a couple fight for 15 minutes, and he hooks them up to all these dyads and all this stuff, so he monitors their physiological responses. But he can, within 15 minutes of watching a couple fight, he can predict with a 93% accuracy if they're going to divorce or not.
Yep.
And
I've read that before.
And what's unbelievable about that, and one of the things that he has brought to this field that's so great, is that he discovered that 63% of the problems that we have in marriage are non-resolvable. That they're just going to be perpetual problems. And these typically are not the big things. These aren't are we going to go to church or not? Or are we going to, how are we going to live our life? And what do we really believe? These are the simpler things, that just the differences and the nuances of the way two different people do life. Because you add to it the complexity of two different family of origins and the way they do life, and those two things are colliding to try to create a new system. So there's lots of things that are not going to be resolved. They're going to be there. And that doesn't mean you fight over them, but there's going to be differences. And those differences aren't things that separate us, I think. Those are things that actually add fuel and energy to create great things.
Okay. So there are unresolvable traits about us and the way that we interact, but that doesn't mean you're getting divorced. That means that you have to be conscious of that, aware of
Right.
it, accept it, and figure out good ways to communicate around it.
Well, yeah, because look at it this way. You could say one of the things I've heard somebody mention was each couple is going to have 10 things they fight over. You know, so if you decide those 10 things between you and your spouse just aren't good, I don't want them, and you decide, all right, I'm going to divorce this spouse and I'm going to marry somebody else. Well, all you're doing is trading 10 things.
That's perfect. Yeah, I like that.
So it's don't divorce the spouse. Divorce the way you look at what's going on, and try it different. And realize, okay, these are just things we're going to not agree on completely, because we have this belief, and this is the fusion fantasy that we have, that we're going to be of one mind when it comes to spouses, right? That we're going to see things the same, and we're not going to fight over things other than the movie we're going to rent on Friday night, and
Yeah. So we take that biblical
it's
one
a
flesh
yeah,
idea, and
yeah, it's a
th-
Hollywood
we
junk.
think you're one person all of a sudden. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so that just does not happen. And so the more I realize, okay, this is a full functioning, their own separate autonomous person I'm with that has views and opinions and everything, that's not personal. That's actually just differences. So there's nothing wrong there. It's just different.
Yeah, I like that. So yeah, so that kind of wraps up the I won't call it theoretical, but the foundational concepts, I think, of a lot of
Right.
this. And like you said, this current slide that we're gonna jump into here is more of a how to. Here's some actual tools that you can go employ in your relationship.
Right. And yeah, and this is the idea. These are two of them are Gottman stuff. The repair attempts and the soft startups. Those are Gottman's work. And Google John Gottman. He's got some great stuff. He's got a book out there, The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, that has a bunch of activities in it too, that are great conversations and things. My wife and I have used that book on some long haul road trips when we were first married.
Nice.
But repair attempts are anytime you get into a tense moment with your spouse, it's very likely one or both of you recognizes this is kind of starting to get off course. This is getting too tense, it's getting heated, and likely one of you will try to attempt to repair things, to try to break the tension, to soften things. It could just be a glance, it could be a statement, it could be an interjection of humor, it could be a change of scenery, something where what it is it's trying to disrupt the current cycle and get it back on task. Because if you think about it, Dustin, I mean, I don't know if this happens in your house, but it does for sure in mine, that I'll get in a conversation with my wife and we start fighting about something, or we'll speak politically correct, we start having a disagreement about something. and and then all of a sudden, whatever it is we're fighting about or talking about 5 minutes into the conversation is not what we started talking about.
Or you literally forget what started it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
We were talking about budgeting. That's one of our gridlock issues is the whole idea of budgeting, because I'm married to an accountant. So,
Yeah, my,
you
my
know,
wife would totally
yeah,
relate to you
Excel
because she's married to an
Excel
engineer.
spreadsheet.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
Excel spreadsheets turn my wife on. So it's
It's my kind of woman.
so-
Yeah.
yeah. Hey, but it's one of those we have these fights over. God, where's this receipt? Where's that? And it's kind of,
Yeah.
and then if this goes on, all of a sudden we're talking about stuff that has nothing to do with budgeting. It's personal things, and I can't believe you did that, and well, you did, and then you realize, wait, what? How did we get to this? And so, repair attempts are ways to keep it on task, to break the tension, and realize it doesn't have to erupt into something that's major emotionally charged. It's just a way to break the mood. One example I've come across, and this might have been from Gottman's work, is in a book that a husband and wife were fighting over something, and they've learned that the simple art of sticking their tongue out at each other, just like their 4-year-old does, will break the mood. And so they're in this tense conversation, and all of a sudden the wife is kind of recognizing, I don't want to keep in this. So she kind of starts to adjust herself to be able to stick her tongue out at her husband. But he recognizes what she's doing, and he beats her to it, and then they both just start laughing. And then they kind of take a break and then come back to what they were talking about. And so repair attempts are simply just subtle ways that I can almost promise are already happening in tense conversations, because the body and the mind and the psyche of us has an amazing ability to break things, to break those cycles. It's just oftentimes we don't even acknowledge it. We just blow right past it. How could you stick your tongue out at me? And then that's all of a sudden a new personal thing. So it's recognizing that that's just a part of it. So learn the art of repair attempts, of just finding a way to break the tension. It could just be a simple one I can think of. This is a really good practical one, Dustin, that let's say you and your wife are having a conversation that turns into an argument, and you're in your living room, and one of you recognizes, wow, I don't really want to be so heated about this, but we still need to continue talking about this because this is a big deal. So one of you just say, hey, can we carry on this conversation in the kitchen?
Yeah.
And then just switch rooms. Or kitchen may not be a good idea depending on what you're talking about, because there's knives and pans there. But, the idea is just find a way to break the tension.
I hear you. And one tip that I think in our case, I wasn't conscious of, again, these repair attempts. I think, for me, this usually comes in the form of trying to be funny, trying to make a light of it. And most of the time that works really well. Sometimes that's pushing the wrong button, because it's
that's a delicate one.
It is.
You don't want to make fun of her,
right? But and I don't. Yeah, and you have to be careful about it. But if you can make fun of the situation, we've been around 12 years. It's very rare that she would take it personal.
Yeah, humor is a great repair attempt.
Yeah, and sometimes I would say that it always diffuses things to an extent. Sometimes it's not 100%. But another tip I've heard along these lines is to hold hands. So even if you don't feel like it, if you're like, this is getting a little heated, it's pretty hard if you're holding hands and facing someone and looking in their eyes, even if you're really angry, and if you love this person and you've been married for a while, that typically will soothe things down and allow you to kind of get back on point about what you're actually started your conversation about.
And the other thing, I think this is where we might be heading towards the end of this call, is the idea of go for a walk together.
Yeah.
Too. Of just, because it seems like, I don't know who it is that came up with the idea of, deep, intimate conversations over heated subjects, whatever. You need to look each other in the eye. You need to sit across the table from each other and sit face to face and talk it out. Well, typically, one or both of you don't really want to do that. Yeah. One of you is going to be comfortable with eye contact, the other's not. So sit beside each other so you don't have to stare at each other, because then you get to where you're not reading the cues of just body language, which may be tied to what's going on or very well may not be. Because if you're just sitting there and all of a sudden your face gets some sort of a weird look, and my wife sees that and then responds to it, it could have just been I had gas. And so I'm just like, oh, God, I'm uncomfortable, but it's not about what we're talking about. It's different. And so if we're walking together, we don't read those cues, and this works really well with emotionally charged situations.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think if you're kind of stepping up the ladder here,
right,
for you and your wife to have a budget conversation probably works a lot better if you're sitting at a table together where you're kind of forced to talk it out and focus on it, versus if you've got something, there's a real problem, there's something very emotionally charged. And we're going to talk again about the power of taking that walk, but I think then being side by side, being able to kind of, I don't know, in my mind, if you're kind of easing into it, you don't have all the pressure of being face to face and all that if it's a big issue to deal with.
Right, and that's, for my wife and I, the greatest budget conversations happen when we're driving, because I have to keep looking forward. Then I can't read. I can't read her. So it is one of those where we don't always have to look each other in the eye for some of these tense conversations. And that's just to kind of relieve a little bit of the attention and then stay on task of what's going on. Obviously, as you come more in line or understand each other and connect better, then you come more eye to eye.
Okay.
And, that's kind of a good metaphor of the way our life is, that the more and more I can connect and understand the person, the more and more I'm going to be facing them.
Yep, you see eye to eye, yeah, proverbially, right? So, okay, right. So I get it. That's good for repair attempts. I think, people listening will kind of personalize that to their own experiences, but I think being conscious that that's occurring and that you can use that to be a better communicator is great. So let's jump to the next one here.
Right. The soft starter. That's the idea of learning how to bring up tough situations or tough concepts or stressful things or gridlock issues softly. Because think about, if you've had a day, I'll put myself under the bus here, that, okay, I've had something that's been going on, let's say, that I just can't wait. I need to talk with my wife about. And so I hit her with it right when she walks in the door.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to go well. It's just not going to happen. It also won't go well if I wait to bring it up as we're falling fast asleep.
Yeah.
It's that I get this brainstorm of, what if we do this? And it's just, I'm all passionate about it. And, I usually kind of get charged later at night. And so I bring it to her at 10:30 as she's dying to go to sleep. It's just not going to work well. So learning how to softly start it is a great one. And it could just very well be, hey, honey, I've got a great idea for something we can do. When would be a good time we could talk about this?
Yeah.
Or I've got something that's been bothering me. When would be a good time we could discuss this? And so it's just kind of softly bringing it up and then following through with all the other stuff we've talked about of being consistent, being honest. And if both of you are doing this, you'll be able to tackle some of the bigger issues in a better way. And it's not that they're going to be resolved, but it's going to be where you're going to understand where you're both coming from better, and you'll be able to better jointly create a path forward.
I like it.
Then the last one is take a break, and that's just exactly what it says. And we've talked about this before, that as you start getting tense, take a break, and then come back to it. And this works well with kids. I have little ones, and they can push my buttons just because they've got things they want to do, and I have something else I want to be doing or need to do or whatever, and I can just find myself erupting. And so the better I can learn to just wait, give me a moment, and just go walk off, get a glass of water, step outside, do something else, take a break, take a couple deep breaths, then come back to it and deal with it. Because if you're talking about a relationship with a human, very few things have to be dealt with right then and there.
Yeah.
So take some time. That's okay as long as you come back to it. Taking time and it's decades, that's probably going to cause you some problems down the road.
Okay. Well, I think taking a break, that's one that we employ a lot, and it's just in that context that you said. Earlier in our marriage we didn't do that, but now that we have 3 small children, there are not many moments in the day that are readily perfect for a big conversation, right, or right, something you need to get off your chest. It's much more, hey, I may suggest, when the kids go to bed tonight, can we talk about whatever, can we talk about right, my career or something that's been bothering me, or let me tell you why I've been feeling so tired lately, that kind of thing, to bring right, up those bigger topics to set that expectation.
And it's important to know that between spouses at some point, share this tip with each other, that if only one spouse is on this call tonight or hears the recording and all of a sudden decides, man, I could start doing that, and they don't let their spouse know I'm taking a break, and the point of it could come across as avoiding still. Yeah. But if you both recognize the power of this and the benefit of it, then it lessens the likelihood of, if you play this card of I need a break, that okay, that's fine. When would you like to come back to this? So rather than you never want to talk about anything, and then it just goes constantly down a different path.
Yeah, because if this is the first time you've ever taken this approach, it's coming back to being clear. It's like, listen, I really want to talk about this. If we can maybe do it in an hour, I'll be much better prepared and more responsive, because right now, the kid's waiting for me in the bathtub or whatever. Right. So right. Yeah, okay, no, that's
dinner's
good.
Burning on the stove.
Right. So those are kind of the 5 key points, and we're going to talk here about some homework, and then we're going to go into Q&A. And so, the workshop's been going a little over an hour now. Obviously, we respect your time. If you can stick around with us, we would love it if you can, and you'll have an opportunity to ask your own question if you haven't already submitted that. But if you have to drop off, we understand that too, and you will have access to this recording, or if you're listening to the recorded version, obviously you can pause this and come back if you're feeling it after an hour here. But let's talk about these action items. One would be, and I think Corey just kind of alluded to it, if you're here solo and you're investing the time, maybe you're on your way to work listening to this as a recording, would definitely encourage you to get your spouse with you to absorb this information, so that they aren't surprised whenever you take a break or whenever you take 3 deep breaths before you respond, and they like, where's this coming from? They realize that you're trying to be a better spouse. Right. I guess there's the situations where the other spouse is just not going to play along and try to learn and sit through a workshop like this. Now, I don't know, Corey, what would you suggest in that situation?
Well, it's one of those, if they don't want to hear all of this, it can just be, hey, I need to take a break because I'm starting to lose it, and I want to still stay engaged with this. So give me a moment, and then let's talk some more. Just be clear about what you're seeking in that moment too. Maybe you're at a situation where you can't take a break because there is decisions that need to be made. There are things that happen in life like that, but those are more the exception than the rule. So it's just be clear and then be consistent on, if you do take one, come back to it and be consistent about that.
Okay. So homework item number 1, watch this presentation with your spouse. Be open about it. If your spouse is not able or willing to listen to it, then I would say take out your favorite 3 points and talk to them about it and say, this is what I learned. I think this could really help us. And this is why I think it's important to me and to us. So that's number 1. Number 2 is something we've also alluded to. As part of your workshop package here, you got access to 2 of Corey's books, one of which is called Buck Naked Marriage. I love this book. It's really kind of takes Corey's simple marriage mantra and runs through all the key parts of marriage. And obviously one of those is communication. And in that, it's really the first chapter in the book. It's got each chapter kind of has a takeaway or an action item. And for this one, it's to do a walk and talk. And Corey, I don't know if you want to just kind of reiterate what that is. And we're encouraging people here, if they can do it for 3 days in a row, that it probably make a pretty dramatic difference in the way they communicate.
Yeah, there's something about the physical movement of just being out. I mean, obviously this isn't maybe the best time of year, depending on where you live, to go out and walk, but you could do it in a mall, a store. It's just, I don't know, think of the picture of you're walking side by side talking through things. And if you can't do a walk and talk, then sit on a swing together side by side, or the couch together side by side, and just talk through things. Or, hey, how was your day? And it doesn't have to be anything serious. It can just be scheduled talk, but it's just that, I don't know, Dustin, this fits into your 15-minute idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Of just taking time out, and if it's too emotionally charged, one way around some of that to help lessen it a little bit is the idea of the walk and talk, that just get into something where it's a routine of sharing a time together, and it's a great picture of life. You're on a journey together side by side. I mean, that's what a walk and talk is, isn't it?
Absolutely. No, I like that. And so if you basically for the next 3 days agree to a 15-minute period or longer if you can do that, and ideally go out for a walk together and just talk. Don't take your phone, and enjoy each other's company, and just hopefully enjoy and maybe talk about the things you've learned in this workshop, because this is really a follow-up to listening to this together.
Right.
Again, if you have small children in the house, the weather doesn't cooperate, you can do this on the couch or in a rocking chair next to each other. Ideally, you'll be walking, but you'll make that commitment to each other. Say, yeah, at 8 o'clock the next 3 nights we're going to do this, and I promise you that making that what seems like a really small commitment, you'll come out on the other end of that feeling reinvigorated when it comes to your communication. So at this point, we're going to go into the Q&A. If you're on the webcast, you can simply type in your question. There should be a box there on the side of the screen. Just type in your question. I'll be seeing those. So basically, I'll take those as they come in order, and I'll read them out anonymously. So I'm not going to say your name. I'll read them out, though, and then Corey and I will answer those. And again, we've had some pre-submitted that we'll get to first. If you're on the phone, you simply hit *2 on your keypad. It'll tell me that someone wants to or ask a question, and I'll bring that up. Um, Before we do that, in case you do need to drop off during the Q&A, I definitely want you to know how to get a hold of Corey. SimpleMarriage.net is his site. It's probably the best marriage site on the internet. It's been around a long time. Just a plethora. I think there's 200 posts there. Pretty much anything you want to know you can find on Corey's site. And then Corey, if you want to run through kind of how people can get a hold of you and some of the other resources you have available, I think that would be helpful.
Easiest way to find me is via email, which is Corey@SimpleMarriage.net. That's something I'm pretty active with every day. Then the two different things that I've got mentioned here, Blow Up My Marriage, it's a course that's designed, the intent of it is for the couple that one or both has heard or said, I'm in love with you, I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore. And it's just it's a 3-month course that's online, so you can take it from anywhere in the world. It's interactive, but it's still at your own pace. It's lifetime access now, and it takes place 3 times a year. So the next one that comes up is in January. So if you're in a marriage that's got some chronic issues and you want a different way to look at what's going on, that's what Blow Up My Marriage is really all about. It's about blowing up what's going on and making something better. And then the next one is Score with a Married Man or Woman. This used to be called Sex on Sundays, and it's being reworked and will be relaunched this next month in December. And it is just, there's a course for him and a course for her, and it's just targeting how to add a spark to create better sex in your life with your spouse. Because at the core, the person you're married to is still a man or a woman. So this takes some of the fundamental things that go on between us and how to use that and harness that energy so that sex isn't just something expected because you're married, but it's something you actually pursue and make time for. I don't know. I think of it as, for the man, it's how to be better at pursuing and wooing your wife. And for a woman, it's how to relieve a little bit of the stress and move sex higher up on the to-do list. I mean, that's kind of seems to be the core of the two things that men and women struggle with the most.
Absolutely. So, and if you guys, aren't familiar with Corey and you are familiar with me, I mean, I'd highly endorse his work. I highly endorse his products, his courses here. Corey also does coaching. If you guys have some
Yep.
really deep-rooted personal problems, I highly encourage you to reach out to Corey as a resource, and he'll definitely treat you right. So I think with that, we'll jump into the questions. And I really love these questions. I've got a lot here that were submitted ahead of time. It's going to take us a little while to run through these. We won't be too long-winded, but I would encourage you to make time to listen to these, because each of these questions, of course, reflect the same question from thousands of other people in the world who are dealing with the same thing. And in a lot of ways, this is where the rubber meets the road, because when you hear a very specific example, it's very likely that you're going to resonate with some of this, and you're going to be able to take away some of the same advice that Corey gives. So I'm going to start with the ones that were pre-submitted, and then I'll come back to the ones that are being submitted right now live. First one: how can we disagree while still showing love and respect? We have been married 16 years, and we still manage to easily offend each other and feel not understood when we disagree.
Okay. Well, this hopefully has been somewhat answered with our whole conversation so far. That one of the things that is a myth to me that I think of when in the couples work that I do is this idea that if my spouse would just understand me, the problem would go away. That's not true. I understand completely how my wife views money. That does not mean all of a sudden I'm excited about doing budgets.
That's a good example.
So yeah. It's one of those. It's recognizing we see it differently, and my view is just as right as her view. Because think of it this way: if it's not a moral issue or something that's a deep-seated value issue, it's all about what brings you relief and comfort, and that's what causes most of our fights. Is I'm more comfortable doing it this way, she's more comfortable doing it that way. Neither one is right, neither one is wrong. So it's recognizing that's not personal. It's just a difference. And so if you can take a little bit of that and reframe it to where it's not personal, now all of a sudden you have the opportunity to be more respectful in the way you view it or the way you say it. Or, hey, this is what I would like. And what I have found is The more you can do that, the more elegant solutions start to arise.
Very good. Well said. Okay, this next question it's fairly long, but I'm going to read it word for word because I think there's a lot of information kind of buried in the wording of the question. So,
Okay.
my husband isn't a feeler. He doesn't like to talk about anything, especially if it involves feelings. His solution to problems is to walk away, cool down, and just forget about it. I, on the other hand, am a feeler. I'm a hyper feeler. When I want to talk about something, I cry. And that is when he checks out completely, which leaves me feeling hurt and feeling abandoned, like he doesn't care. And to top it off, he got what he wanted out of the situation, and I didn't. I never do. And worse, it leaves me guessing what he's thinking, and I have a great imagination. So how do we meet in the middle?
Okay. Well, all right. This goes back into the thinking and feeling dynamics. That she is a feeler, is what she's saying, but she wants to know what he's thinking. In reality, she wants to know what he's feeling.
Yes.
So she's already seeking something that she's probably not going to get because he's more the thinker. So it's recognizing he can sit stone-faced and still care for her deeply. Just because somebody does not join them in the feeling does not mean they do not care, even though that's how we often interpret it, isn't it?
It is,
So,
yeah.
so it's just realizing, okay, I'm the feeler, so my bent would be I want him to join me there, but he's probably not going to. So how could I tailor the conversation some to possibly elicit a little bit more thinking from him? Which might mean you need to come at it more analytically, if possible, to start. Then let the feelings come out, because this isn't about tailoring you to fit him. Just like I'm assuming you don't want him to all of a sudden fit you, because that would be two people crying things out all the time, I guess. Or
And in his case, it would be dishonest because that's not the way he expresses himself.
Yeah, if you go to the extremes, you're going to have two people that are just hyper feelers or two robots,
Right.
And you want both. In actuality, every person has both. We are just more predominant one or the other. So it's recognizing just because they're different doesn't mean there's anything wrong. So recognize that I may start crying, but I could learn to compose myself and still stay present, and hopefully he will recognize, especially if he listens to this, you don't have to join her in the crying. You don't have to make her feel better if she's crying. Listen to her. Be with her. And respond. And that doesn't mean you have to respond as a feeler. Respond with what you think, because that's starting the process of connecting better.
Okay. And there are related questions here. So again, we can't go super in depth with each one because you would really need more information to really unpack
Right.
all the issues.
Right.
But I think keep listening if that was your question, or if you're feeling a similar way in your marriage, because some of the follow up questions here kind of hit on similar themes. So the next one's also a long one, but I think it's also important to read out. So my husband is majorly turned off by talk time and has a really bad attitude, which dooms each conversation from the very beginning. It doesn't matter how mature and rational I am, he still finds a way to blame me and then starts to speak really rudely. By that time, I'm hurt, and the conversation turns from the issue to rudeness. Then he says something like, "See, this is what happens every time we try to talk." I know that past bad experiences with talking are still feeding his fear of it, but I know I have changed since then, and he won't give me a chance to show that I've changed. How can I help him see that his negative expectations when we talk are becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy? And more importantly, what can we do to turn this around?
Well, part of it is recognizing that she recognizes she's changing things. So if she can take a courageous step, and this really is a courageous step of anytime the thing shifts to rudeness and disrespect as a way or an attempt to stop the conversation or change the subject, don't take that personal and stay on task. Because you don't have to respond to not every argument has to be accepted. So if you're invited to it by he wants to shift gears, don't. You always do this. Well, okay, but we're talking about this. And you
keep bringing it back to the point.
Yeah, you just use deflectors this works with a spouse that does this. This also works with kids. You never let me go out of the house. irregardless, you're staying home tonight. That it's just stay on task. And part of the way to do that is realize that what goes on is not personal, even though it seems like it is, and it can quickly turn to that. If you can interpret it as it's not personal, it's just an attempt to stop and derail a conversation. Well, stand your ground a little more and see what happens. And that doesn't mean it solves it. It just means maybe you get a little bit closer. And then the next time you get a little bit closer, and then all of a sudden you realize, wait, we can actually do this.
Yeah, no, that's good. And yeah, I'm left here thinking. So with the core question being, how can I help him see that his negative expectations when we talk are becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy? I mean, is it as simple and as saying we need 9 o'clock tonight, we need to talk and really sit down and just make sure that she's using the words, look, you have negative expectations about our conversations. It's becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's extremely frustrating because you expect every conversation to turn bad. Now, we don't know because we can't talk to her if she's actually used those words. But in a lot of these cases where these paragraphs start with my husband, and then they're saying exactly what he thinks and feels and reacts to, a lot of times, speaking as that husband, we don't know that. Obviously, we know he would know that the conversations are turning bad, but he may not realize that you may be putting thoughts in. You may be reading more into him than what you may be giving him too much credit for knowing what he's making you feel like, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, but you're also focusing on something you can't control.
Yeah.
That the better thing to do is to realize, okay, I can control me in this conversation. So, yeah, we have a history of this not going well, and he has the history of leading that charge of it not going well. But I don't have to go down that path with him. So I can hold my ground, and I don't have to be defensive or aggressive about it. I can just be firm of, hey, no, I want to keep talking about it. Well, but you always, no, I want to keep talking about this. And it could mean you have to stop, and then you come back to it later, and maybe there is a time when he's open and you can say, I feel like you lead us down a bad path in this. But it's a way, focus on what you can control. If you try to lead him where you want him to go, he's going to react poorly.
Okay. No, good. The next question here is one that Bethany, my wife, saw before our workshop, and she thought that I wrote it, and I did not. So I want to make that clear. But no, it's kind of funny because I think a lot of people will relate to this. So Here's the question. Honestly, the communication in our marriage was great before kids. But now that we have 3 little ones, I find myself getting really tired, and he sort of gets the leftovers at the end of the day. When we do talk, it's always all about the kids. Help us get us back, please. So this is, and again, we have 3 children, 8, 6, and 3 years old.
Right.
And, after long days, I can totally relate to this where you're just tired, and it's like, your spouse just gets the leftovers because you just don't feel like you have anything left in the tank to give. Right. And then when you finally do get time to talk, or you do get a date night, all you talk about is your kids, and you kind of lose your own identities as a couple. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
All right. Well, 2 things that come to my mind is, one is learn how to steal moments together throughout the day. That could be on the phone. If you're at work, she's at home, you're at home, whatever, and you're apart. A quick phone call, just been thinking about you. Those are little moments that you can steal. And those can go a long way. The other is learn the art of closing your door during the day. That if you need some time to talk about something with your spouse, your kids do not need to be with you 24/7. You're not equipping them as a parent very well if you're doing that. Obviously, if it's an infant, that's the exception. So, sure. But even then, they take naps. They sleep. They have little bassinets that are safe. So set them down and steal moments together where it is a true pursuit of each other, that it's a conversation that's adult. And then the last one on how to help us get us back, that, when we go on dates, it's always about the kids. My wife and I do this. We went, when we celebrated like our 18th anniversary, we went to a cabin up in the mountains or the hills near in Oklahoma. And we had a rule for that whole weekend. There was no kid talk. And so while we were there, it was just us. and it was tough to start.
Yeah.
But as we kind of got into it, we started sharing memories and started talking some more, and then it turned into dreams and plans and goals and life, and so it could just be, if you do a date night, just make the rule of, hey, no kid talk tonight.
Yep.
And
We do that.
yeah, and it kind of forces you to have to think about your spouse again and think about your adult life again. And so it's just kind of set some parameters, but you can find moments with each other, even with kids screaming around the house. So it's just be intentional and seek them out.
No, I like that, and I think for people who struggle with putting their kids behind their marriage, in other words, making their marriage a higher priority, I think two thoughts that help me with that when I go down that path too much is one, the most important thing you can do for your kids and raising them well is to give them a good example of marriage and to love your
Right.
spouse well. And two, that someday your kids are not going to be in your home, and you two will be, hopefully,
Right.
if you're healthy and live a long life together, and you need to remain connected as a couple and not put your entire worth of your family in your kids.
Right.
So, yeah, I really like that question. Next question. Is the expression of writing, and this is something we haven't talked about yet, is the expression of writing an acceptable form of communication? I'm more transparent and honest in my feelings when I can write it down, like in a letter. But my husband's response is that if I can't speak it to his face, then don't bother.
Okay. Um, well, obviously, some people are going to be more writers. Some people are going to be more talkers. Some people may be singers in the way they want to express deep things. They're poets.
Yeah.
It's kind of knowing who you are, be authentic. Obviously, writing can go so far and can get across some things, but then when you can back that up and still continue to grow in your ability to say those things, it adds a new depth to it. I mean, this goes back to it's just different. He wants spoken, you want written. Neither one is right, neither one is wrong. They're just different. So use what works. Find a way to use what works. I mean, I actually counseled a couple that is in some major crisis, and what they have found is writing to each other helps. And so they'll actually be in the same room on like some sort of instant messaging service talking to each other via that. Because it's a way to take some of the emotional tension out of it and talk. And for the moment, hey, I have no problem with that. Obviously, the life of a relationship, you need to move beyond that and still have some moments offline. But use what works.
I like it. Yeah, and so to answer her first question, absolutely, writing is an acceptable form of communication.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes you can write to yourself. A lot of people find a lot of power in journaling, so that they
Yep.
can kind of process those thoughts and emotions, and then if they verbalize them to their spouse, they're more coherent because they've had a chance to think about them a little more. Um, and I encourage a lot of couples to stick with the old-fashioned love letters from time to time, and because there's still power in the written word, and at least for me, I'm a writer, and for me, I can definitely do a much better job of expressing how I feel, because I'm not a real feelings talking kind of guy, by writing, because it gives me a chance to think about it, and I can write it down, I can edit it, and then I feel like I'm very comfortable. And what I've
Yeah.
actually done in the past is I've got this short love letter or this short letter, talking about something, and then I can go read it to my spouse or read it to my wife. And that may sound a little odd, but for me that works well. I'll oftentimes, in a professional setting, write an email, so it gives me time to process my thoughts before I make a phone call. And I'll use that email not as a script, but
Right.
I've now got coherent thoughts, and I've thought through
Yeah.
some of the issues. And the same thing can be very valuable in your marriage. So, okay. Next question. When one of the differences between us is that he's a quick thinker and I am not, what is acceptable in the conversation? So, in other words, I need time to respond, digest, etc., and he gets extremely irritated by this. So she's they're talking, she's taking her time in the conversation, and it sounds like he's getting really impatient and irritated by the fact that she's not immediately responding.
Right. Well, I would be willing to bet that in that relationship, that's what drew them together. That, oh, I love that she's so thoughtful.
Yeah.
And I love that he's so quick on his feet. Because that's what typically happens. What draws us together drives us crazy as we go along. So again, this is just different. Take time, slow down. Obviously, if the time that you need to think is 4 or 5 days, it's really hard to have a long going conversation that way. But if you want some time to think, take some time. Just ask for it. Say straight up, "Hey, I'm not sure what I think on this. Give me a moment." Or take a few deep breaths. Share what you think. If he's impatient, that's on him. So it's take care of yourself. Speak up. If he's listening to this, take a deep breath. Give her some space, because what you're really wanting, I'm guessing, is a response, a reaction to things so that it can continue forward. So recognize the process.
Good. Yeah, the last kind of pre-question here, and then we've got a couple live questions. Starting conversations is difficult now, especially as he does not appreciate the female quote-unquote small talk. He likes facts only or deep and meaningful conversations. The former I am trying to do by thinking about what I say before I talk to him, which is really not natural for me, and I believe we have to learn how to do the small talk first, which can then lead into bigger things. Is this wrong? So I guess to paraphrase, she feels there's value in small talk and kind of easing into conversations. He's more of a give me the facts, ma'am, and if we're gonna bother talking, let's make it deep and meaningful. And she's kind of feeling lost, I think, in what's right between the two of them.
Yeah, this just comes down to what makes each of you comfortable. I am a storyteller, that I give backstory and details. And one of the things that would drive me absolutely crazy is as I would start to do that to set up whatever it is I'm going to ask or share, my wife would kind of give me this hurry it up response with her hand, or she'd kind of roll her hand forward like, come on, get to the point.
Yeah, we have a total role reversal here, because I'm sounding much like your wife. I'm kind of an impatient. Get to the point.
It would tear me up. It's like, come on, you don't even care. You don't even love me if you don't want to know my stories. And blah blah. It's like, wait, that is not at all what she's saying. She's just saying, give me the facts. And so it's again, it's not a moral issue. It's just about what brings relief and comfort. So recognizing I want more small talk. Okay, well, seek ways to get more small talk. Seek ways to connect better. Share that and just say, hey, I would like to share more small talk with you. I'd like to share simple things with you. And see if he can do that some. But he has just as much right to say, I just want the facts. Because tell me what it is you need, what involves me, so I can move on about my day. And obviously every path we choose has consequences to it. So we need to be honest about that and be consistent and be willing to take the hit for what we do and realize there's consequences to what we do. So if I just continually stay facts, well, then I'm likely not going to have a deeper relationship with my spouse. But if I continue to say small talk, that can also not have a deeper relationship, because small talk can be very surface. So it's just recognizing there's differences. So how can I soothe myself better and stay present? How can I still stay connected without saying anything, maybe, and see what happens?
Okay. It looks like the final two questions, unless some more come in. This one's a short one, but it's a very important one. I think it's a pretty deep question. If you have made request of your spouse and he continues to decline the request, what do you do?
Okay.
That's a loaded question, I know.
That is a very loaded question. I mean, obviously, if there's something you want and they aren't willing, then that's a gridlock issue. I mean, the definition of gridlock is when what you want is blocked by what your spouse wants. And we have those. Those are a part of life. And they're for sure a part of marriage. So it seems like it's not that he doesn't know what you want. It's just he's not willing to give it. And so you have to come to grips with that and digest that more. Because it's easier to kind of feign ignorance of, well, maybe he just doesn't understand me. Well, no. I know full well my wife wants a budget. I just don't want to do it because I'm lazy. And I don't want to keep up with that kind of stuff. But that's on me, not her. So it's I don't know. This is where it's kind of you have to be willing to take a big move of, hey, this is what I want, and without more backstory, I don't really know where to take this. But it's if you're requesting something and they won't do it, then what's another alternative that you have? I mean, obviously, it's not hopefully leave the marriage, but sometimes they get that severe, and then you're dealing with bigger things.
Yeah, which it, and I was actually going to go there. I mean, it's obviously beyond the scope of a relatively short workshop like this. But
Right.
a question I hear sometimes when people, and this is where I'll literally defer them to Corey. If they come to me through Engaged Marriage, our site isn't going to get into a counseling, deep rooted problems type of issues. So related to this though, if you do have some bad issues going on and you do need counseling, you are the professional. Obviously there's a place for professional help, and
Right.
people should seek that out. That
Right.
hopefully goes without saying. But what if you're in these one-sided situations where you want help for your marriage and you want to seek counseling, you want your spouse to go with you and they just refuse? What is your advice? And again, it may be very personal depending on the situation, but in general, if someone's listening to this because they're kind of desperate, where should they turn, or what would be the right course of action if it's totally one-sided?
Then you go on your own.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's just you go, but seek out a systems therapist, somebody that's trained to do couples work, not an individual therapist. There's a difference, and I'm biased, so
Yeah.
seek out somebody because the way I view things, even if I'm working with one person, I still see them in relationships, in systems, because that's
Yeah.
just the way I'm wired. So you can go on your own and you can change your marriage yourself, or realize though there's a huge risk that if your spouse continues to dig their heels in the ground and you continue down a path of I'm going to change things, it's very possible it ends things.
Yeah.
But that is a reality of marriage, and I hate that, but it is a reality. So I don't want to skirt around that, but it is true.
Yep. Okay. Well, we're not going to end on that somber note. We have one final question. It's actually about sex and intimacy, but I know you're perfectly qualified to answer it, and
Okay.
I think the sex and intimacy are highly related to communication. So
Oh, absolutely. They're completely intertwined.
absolutely. So here's the question. My husband and I waited to have sex together until we got married. I feel like we had so much passion before we got married. And now that we can actually have sex, it's like there's no more passion. It almost
Right.
feels like a chore, something we have to do. Is there any advice on how to spark more passion in our sex life?
Wow. Well, part of what charged the passion was probably the wet paint, do not touch idea.
Sure.
The hands off. There's a line. There's only so far, and so we have that rebellious streak in us that's I want to keep pushing it, and so that's that. But whenever that's removed, obviously, then it's like, wow, hold on a sec, we just lost a whole bunch of stuff. So this is a deeper issue of I don't know. I think of it as how passionately do you live life? Because oftentimes those go hand in hand. The way we do sex is the way we live life, and the way we live life is the way we're going to do sex. Because sex truly is just a language. So the more I can start to just live my life passionately, the more that's going to spill over into the bedroom. The more you can pursue each other, tease each other, bring out a little bit more of the animalistic side of us. That when you have, I mean, it sounds like it was a woman that left the comment
Yeah.
that if she's the high desire or the low desire partner, whenever she has those times when she's particularly charged, just because it's that time, near ovulation, usually biologically speaking, a woman's more interested in sex because that perpetuates the species. But if you have those times where you're just kind of particularly charged, let him know, pursue him, be playful, and see if that sparks something in him to kind of up his game too and pursue you. And I mean, it is just a dance, and it's communication through and through. The other thing I can think of is and this is a shameless plug, but go to sexymarriageradio.com That's a show I've been doing for over 2 years now with Gina Paris helped me start it, and now Shannon Etheridge is my co-host, and that's exactly what we talk about is married sex and what trips us up and how to make it better. So there's a wealth of stuff there that we can't get into on this call.
Yeah, and again, I'm not looking to plug anything either. I was going to suggest your podcast or your Sexy Marriage Radio. Obviously, you talked earlier about your SCORE course, which
Right.
gets, obviously it used to be called Sex on Sundays, kind of sex not being a chore. That's
Right.
the theme of your course.
Right.
If you enjoy this workshop and you're looking for kind of a quick and not expensive resource on that exact topic. One of our previous workshops I did with Elisa De Lorenzo was on
Mhm.
how to have great sex and better intimacy in your marriage. And there are a lot of good practical tips
Yep.
in that workshop as well. So you can find that on Engage Marriage, or send me an email to Dustin@engagemarriage.com, and I'll try to help you out as well with that. So Corey, that's all the questions that we have.
Wonderful.
This has been fantastic. I thank
Yeah.
you again for investing so much time here in the workshop, and being generous with your books for everyone that signed up. I think people can spend some time with those and really make a big difference.
I hope so. I mean, that's kind of what they're designed is to be kind of straightforward and easily applicable.